Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Neuroelectrics webinar. My name is Ignacio, and I'm the sales manager at Neuroelectrics, and I will be your host today. We will be talking about synchronizing stimulus presentation with EEG using SuperLab. I'm very happy to introduce our guest, Hisham Abboud, founder and president of Cedrus Corporation, a company that's dedicated to developing actually innovative software and hardware solution for the psychology and psychophysiology research community, and with a background in electrical engineering from the Catholic University of America. Hisham's passion for research tools led him to create SuperLab, one of the most widely used stimulus presentation software solutions compatible with Neuroelectrics products. And since the launching of Cedrus in 1990, he has spearheaded the development of SuperLab response pads, the Lumina F MRI compatible model, Steam Tracker, which is a synchronization tool for EEG and eye tracking research. With over 3 decades of experience, Hisham remains committed to advancing scientific research through cutting-edge technology and personalized customer services. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. The stage is yours, Hisham.
Thank you. Thank you, Nacho. Yeah, good morning. Well, good morning from where I'm at. It's 7 in the morning here. Good afternoon to you. Just a brief outline of the seminar. Just gonna introduce a little bit Cedrus, a little bit of an overview of what LSL is, lab streaming layer, and then give a quick demo of the SuperLab 6 software, and then also a preview at SuperLab 7, which is what we're working on right now. Very, very different. And then we're going to show you a brief video of neuroelectric software actually accepting event markers being sent by SuperLab, and then Q&A. Well, thank you for joining us. First of all, thank you for making the time today. My name is Hisham, and we are based in San Pedro, California, which is about near the port of Los Angeles, about 3 kilometers out. And so the idea for this webinar, how did that come about? So last year, we have 2 editions of SuperLab, SuperLab 6 and X6. So last year, we added support in the X6 edition for lab streaming layer, LSL. So as you probably know, LSL is basically a communication method developed at UCSD in San Diego. And basically, it just allows research tools to communicate to each other so that you don't have to not everybody has to have their own method of doing so. It sort of offers a standardized approach for these tools to communicate with each other. For example, you may have heard of the Pupils Lab eye tracker in Germany. So when it transmits the gaze data using LSL, so any software that uses LSL can receive this gaze data and deal with it and interpret it. So after we added support for event markers, we thought it would be prudent to test it. So we reached out to Neuroelectrics, and they have very gratefully offered to help. So we did testing with them last September, and it was successful. If anything, it was actually too successful. Based on feedback from Neuroelectrics, we actually ended up adding a feature to reduce the amount and the type of event markers being sent. It's basically an option now. You'll see that in the screenshot a little bit later. Yeah, and then after that, we were like, why not do a webinar and showcase this feature, show people a different way of sending event markers. A brief outline of the company. Well, like I said, we're a small company. All we do is science products. We don't really do anything else. We don't do consulting, government grants, none of the sort. We are based in San Pedro, California, normally sunny, not today. We occupy 800 square meter office. This is where we do all basically development. We don't do assembly, that's done elsewhere. And we do only 3 product categories. Okay, and we have users in over 80 countries. Product categories that we do. So the first category is response pads. So we make the Riponda response pads. They are really nice, ergonomic desktop response pads. They can send event markers as well. They come in 4 different button configurations depending on the type of experiment you're doing. The second category is, this, by the way, Riponda is our 6th generation model. You would think that, what's in a response pad? You press a button, it produces output, right? But this is actually we shipped the first one response pad back in 1995, and this is our 6th generation model. So there's quite a bit of work going into these little boxes. Okay, the second type of response paths we sell is fMRI compatible ones. Probably not the, I don't know if anybody's interested in that need, probably not. But basically, after we started shipping our response paths in 1995, people started calling and emailing and saying, hey, can I stick this in an MRI scanner? And the answer was absolutely not. There's lots of electronics and metal in there. So back in 2002, we started shipping the Lumina models, which are made from 100% plastic and fiber optic. And we've sold over 3,000 of these systems worldwide so far. Okay, now also based on customer feedback, when we shipped the very first version of SuperLab all the way back in 1991, the very first version had support for sending event markers to products like EEG. But at the time, we supported National Instruments IO cards, so, and the problem with that was that after people bought SuperLab and they bought the IO card, they still had to make a custom cable. Some labs have no problem with that. Some labs are not equipped with that, and custom cables are, sometimes they're not. I'm not a fan of custom cables personally, but anyway, so about 15 years ago, we started shipping our own custom-made solutions in the form of STIN tracker and CPOD, depending on how much you need. And they come basically in different form factors ready to plug and play. So no custom cables necessary. And they also provide features such as automatic marking of visual stimuli using light sensors and auditory stimuli. It's all done in the box itself without any need to intervention from the software. So, and then the last product category is our SuperLab family. And like I mentioned earlier, we have two editions. We have SuperLab 6, we have SuperLab X6, which adds support for higher end features such as LSL and Tobii eye trackers. It can record gaze data, and you can do gaze contingent presentations as well as send event markers over the network to neuroelectrics without the need for any additional hardware. And SuperLab Cloud is a COVID pandemic baby. Basically, it allows you, it's a subscription. It allows you to publish an experiment to your SuperLab Cloud account. And from there, obviously not using EEG headset. That's not something people usually have at home, but basically it allows people anywhere to run experiments, and then collected data is automatically uploaded to your cloud account. And I'll mention very quickly, we now have a new baby in our product line. We now offer an MRI compatible. That's a 2024 addition to our product line. Okay, so generating event markers. So traditionally, this was done using a piece of hardware, for example, STIN tracker, and you send event markers from stimulus presentation software such as SuperLab or PsychoPy, and then the hardware translates that into a TTL signal, which basically a fancy name for saying 0 volt or 5 volts. And so that's how it's typically done. Now, another method is over the network, right? The method 2, and that's basically how LSL does it, lab streaming layer. Now, the question is that usually comes to mind is, well, how about network delays and network latencies and all that? So LSL solves this issue by synchronizing the clocks on the sending and the receiving ends, and by time stamping the events that are being sent. So when SuperLab sends an event marker to Neuroelectrics, and both of us are running LSL, we are sending an event marker with a timestamp, and then Neuroelectrics records the timestamp. So this is how they get around network delays and network latencies. Okay, so this is basically, if you were using SuperLab, this is what the screen would look like if you wanted to enable LSL support. And it's really, really easy. You just turn the switch on, and usually the defaults will work. The defaults as is on the screen, just turn that on, click OK, and you're ready to go. Why is event marking important? Again, I'm sure all of you are up to speed on that, but basically you put the net on, you are collecting a bunch of data, analog data, and it's usually in the microvolt range. And it's hard to tell what is happening when. So event marking basically helps you make sense of the data that you are collecting. So basically, if you look at the bottom here, you can see if you are sending TTL event markers, you are putting a marker on the screen, for example, that from this point on, the participant is responding to a visual stimulus. Or in the case of LSL, you might see a different, it might look a little bit different on the screen, but basically you'll know that from that point on, something happened and the participant is responding to a stimulus. This is why event marking is very important, because without it, really, it's really difficult to analyze the data or make sense of the biometric data you're collecting. So I'm gonna pause for a second. I'm gonna show a brief demo of SuperLab 6. So I'm going to build a small experiment in SuperLab. Like I said, it's a quick tour. So basically, SuperLab 6 is organized into blocks, trials, and events. So I'm going to create a block, and I'm going to create a trial, and I'm going to call it words. And I'm going to create one word. Let's call it, and event of type text. Now notice over here in SuperLab, you can specify the event type. It can be audio, it can be the event marker, it can be a movie, an ISI, which is basically just a simple delay, self-paced reading. Self-paced reading is a neat feature. I'll show it to you briefly. So let's say this is going to be my separator, a demo of the self-paced reading feature. Okay, so and then if I preview that, SuperLab is going to show one segment at a time. I'm pressing a key. I see the next segment, etc. And then I can choose, for example, to have the text be cumulative, so it's not erasing the previous text. And placeholder, I'm going to say none. So just this is very handy for reading experiments. Now, for the purpose of my demo, I just need just a simple text. So I'm going to say, let's say Apple, for example. All right, so now I have created these three items. All I have to do is connect them to each other. So I'm going to tell SuperLab that block one includes the words, and the words include this event. And at this point, I actually have something ready to run. So if I press run, I'm not going to save data in this case. Say Apple, I press a key, I can continue. Now, it's very common to want to add a cue so that the participant's attention is centered on the middle of the screen. So I'm going to add a cue, and I'm going to call it a cue. And I want that to be like a simple plus sign. Let's make that a little bit bigger. And I want that to be on the screen for 1 second. And I want that to appear first. So I'm going to move it up. And I'm going to add it to my trial. So now if I run this, I'm going to see the cue followed by the word, press a key, I continue. Now, if you are building a real world experiment, you're not going to be doing this, obviously. You're not, if you have, let's say, 50 words, you're not going to create 50 events and 50 trials. That would take too long. So in SuperLab, we have a feature called stimulus lists. And I'm going to create a list of type text. And I'm going to call it fruits. I'm going to say apple, banana, guava. Okay. And so when I go back and I edit the event I created earlier, I'm going to double click on it. And then in the stimulus tab, I'm going to tell SuperLab, instead of using the text that I've entered here below, please pick something from a list. And if I have multiple lists, I can choose what list I want. Okay. So now, if I run this, I'm going to get 3 presentations because my list has 3 words in it. Okay, Q, Apple, Q banana, you go, okay. And if I want to randomize, um, go to the randomize tab, turn these two options on, and that's it. Now my words are being randomized. Okay. So this is roughly speaking how SuperLab works. How does this distinguish SuperLab from other software packages on the market? The biggest difference is there is no programming language in SuperLab. Everything is done with a point-and-click user interface. Okay, so what this means is, there might be some types of experiment you may not be able to do because there is no programming language. But on the other hand, 90% of the experiments that are typically used, you can do them in a fraction of the time that would take you to use CyclePy or ePrime or presentation. You can still build really powerful experiments in SuperLab. You can create rules, and I'm going to show you an example. And the way we do rules in SuperLab is very similar to, for example, if you, in your mail program, if you create a mail filter, you can say something like, if subject contains neuroelectrics, then highlight it or move it to that folder, right? So we do something very similar in SuperLab. So I'm going to create just a demo rule to show you, give you an idea of the approach that we use. It's all in front of you, all we think is easy to use. So I can say if the following criteria are met, and I can decide what the criteria is. I can say if trial's reaction time is under 500 milliseconds, and I can add multiple criterion. So I can say, and time since start of block is under 5 minutes, and then I can click on that, the end word over here, switch it from end to or. And then if this criteria is true, is what do I want to do? I can choose to do a whole bunch of things. Increment a counter, assign random number, start a block, exit the experiment, restart the block. So there's a whole bunch of options here I can do. And the point of what I'm showing you here is you don't need to learn a programming language. I mean, it's all in front of you. It's all point and click. And it will get easier in SuperLab 7, even easier. I mean, this is already pretty easy, but it will get even easier. Now, we did all this. We want to set up LSL. How do we do that? So you go to the experiment menu in SuperLab. You say event marking. If you have a TTL device, like a stim tracker, you can customize it. But since this webinar is about LSL, we just go to lab streaming layer. And this is a screenshot that I showed you earlier in the presentation. I just turned that on, and that's it. Click on OK. And right now, every time, if I run this experiment and I have an LSL device connected, you will see an event marker for the Q and an event marker for the word every time. They'll all be nice on your file. Okay. So I'm going to show you now a preview of SuperLab 7, which is, again, very different from what I showed you in SuperLab 6. One big difference, really. So in SuperLab 6, you notice that basically you have blocks and trials and events. In SuperLab 7, we completely redid that. So we have blocks, trials, and the trial design. And the trial design is very graphical, very easy to use. I mean, it's really very modern. There's really nothing out there among our competitors, nothing even close to it. So this is basically what you're seeing on the screen over here is basically a scaled down view of your monitor. So it's a true what you see, what you get design. So let's say I want to add a picture. Okay, well, let's say I want to add, I have a folder. I want to present a list of pictures. Right? So I'm going to click on the plus here to add my first item. I see the toolbox, and I'm gonna add a stimulus here. SuperLab automatically prompts for the location of the files. I have some over here. These were actually sent to us by a customer. So I'm going to present, I'm going to select 3 photos. Now, SuperLab is going to notice that I've selected more than one photo, more than one picture at the same time. So it's going to say, hey, you selected 3 files. Do you want to create a new list? And it will suggest the folder name as a default list name. So I'm going to say, okay. And now I have that on the screen, and then I'm gonna close the toolbox, and I can edit the picture. I can move it anywhere I want. Just really a true point and click user interface. I can recenter it. Right. So uh, now I'm going to show you new features that are in 7. This is the overall approach. For example, in 7, if you're doing something with shapes, you can create a shape on the fly, built in. You don't need to use a picture anymore. And you can just make it a solid, change the color, you move it on the screen, you can make the position variable, right? So it appears at random in one of 4 locations on the screen, for example. So if I want to do that, let's say I want a 2x2 grid, and then SuperLab moved it automatically to one of the 4 positions. Okay, it can be rotated. So there's a lot more options in SuperLab 7. Also, speaking of new types of stimuli you can present, SuperLab 6 did a really good job with perception and memory and that type of experiments. But one weak point we had in SuperLab 6 has always been social psychology, right? So in SuperLab 7, we are adding support for things like a slider. So you can, for doing things, operations like scale, right, ratings and stuff like that. We are adding support for a timer, so you can have a countdown timer. You can, again, a number of options over here. You can choose display time or display just a graphic, etc. And we are also adding support for web pages. That takes a few seconds to load, please. So yeah, so you can actually now display a web page and observe what the user is doing. Now, if you have SuperLab X, the X7 edition, the X7 edition can actually record a video of the screen while a page is being navigated by the user, so you can actually study it later on and see how they responded, what they do. And the web page is basically just like any other object in SuperLab. You can move it around, you can do whatever you want. Also in SuperLab 7, or the X7 edition of SuperLab, we are adding support for multiple monitors. Now, this comes in really handy if you have, for example, virtual reality goggles or just have a multiple monitor setup. So to activate that, you just click on that, say add monitor, and now I can switch between the 2 slides on the monitor and just keep editing and building the experiment. Yeah, this really, yeah, very, very different from SuperLab 6, but at the same time retains a lot of the number of ideas. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. I think this concludes my tour of SuperLab, and now I'm going to show you a video, a quick video about LSL actually working. Okay, so this video is about 2 minutes long, but I think you'll find it worth your time.
Yeah, in this video, we wanted to show you how easy it is to mount the setup, because not everyone has a background on doing EEG. So both the head caps and how the electrodes are designed make it very simple and fast to do the montage and to achieve good impedances to get a good quality of the signal. You can also see that there's an electrode on the left eye. We can also record EOG activity, and we have up to 32 electrodes. The software is also very intuitive, and we have made it very easy to combine it with SuperLab. Here you can label some of the markers. It's not really necessary, but for clarity. And then the only thing that you need to do is write SuperLab in the inlet and activate the LSL. This way, the markers that SuperLab is sending are received, and you can also see the labels on the screen. We could also combine it with traditional TTL signals that we could see on screen. In case, I don't know, maybe the experiment requires also a button that the subject has besides the visual stimulation. But yeah, we receive a lot of customer inquiries regarding how to do these kind of experiments because not everyone has a background on programming, right? And even the ones that try to do it, they usually have problems with jitter, time synchronization. So SuperLab, it's a solution that not only is easy to use to navigate the graphic interface, but also it accounts for this, so the user don't have to build the blocks itself.
So I think this concludes our demonstration part of
Okay.
SuperLab and the LSL integration with neuroelectrics. Happy to hear your questions.
I have one that was at the beginning regarding the respondent Lumina, that
Mhm.
in the picture they were not showing any wire. And the question was is if those keyboards were wireless.
No, the Lumina system is not wireless. Designed with plastic and 100% plastic and fiber optics.
Okay.
Even there are not. We don't even have screws to close the plastic case. So it's all glued together to make sure there's zero metal inside. So they're
Right.
100% safe, and they've been tested for with up to 70 scanners, no issues.
Mhm.
Wireless
Yeah.
becomes a different ball game, and it is something we're looking at it, but it's a low priority project, honestly. But it is something we've been looking at.
No, for
Yeah,
sure. For the MRI room, this is very complex.
yeah.
And actually, I'm not sure if that's even possible with the technology that we have these days. Yeah, also, it will maybe introduce delays and so on if we're talking about Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So, yeah. There's also a question about hyperscanning, whether you can have two persons that have an EEG headset looking at the same super lab experiment. From neuroelectrics perspective, this could be possible. The only thing is that you need, of course, two headsets and they can read the stream. So you could have markers on both EEG data. I don't know if you want to add something, Hisham.
I wasn't sure if the question is about that or about presenting. I think maybe the question was about showing the stimuli on two separate monitors at the same time. Is that?
Well, it doesn't say, it only says hyperscanning. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe if we have two monitors. Yeah.
Yeah, so that can be done. I mean, with SuperLab 6, it can be done by basically buying a video splitter. And right in SuperLab 7, if you have the X7 edition of SuperLab, you don't even need any additional hardware. It's just
Mm.
SuperLab 7 allows you to design basically for multiple monitor support.
And what you mentioned about the VR, it's because each eye counts as in screen, or because you want to have like one screen showing what the VR is showing.
It can be done either way, but
Uh-huh.
usually a lot of software development kits that come with these VR goggles, like the ones from Meta, Facebook, and they
Uh-huh.
usually the way they do it from a programming perspective is that each eye looks like a separate monitor. So with a multiple monitors, multiple display support in SuperLab 7, you can actually have things showing differently.
This with the 7 version, right? Not the
Yeah,
6. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, and that split thing that you mentioned is actually a piece of hardware, right? That you send the HDMI signal or
yeah,
whatever, and it splits. I see, I see.
yes, yes.
We have Alberto that's asking if that's compatible with Windows and Linux.
Windows and Macintosh. We
Okay.
don't support Linux. Yeah, we really have
Okay.
not had enough people asking for a Linux version. We
Mhm.
could port it to Linux if there is enough support for that, but we really haven't seen that. Yeah, as I'm
And
in fact, when I showed you SuperLab 6, that was running on the Mac, and when I showed you SuperLab 7, that was running on Windows. So
you're right. And then I think this question I kind of already mentioned it, but we can go over again, which is if you can receive markers with LSL and TTL. No,
yes,
sorry,
you
not
can.
receive, actually send markers.
Yeah, we can
Okay.
absolutely do that. Yeah, there's no,
Mhm.
they're two completely independent features in
Mhm.
SuperLab. Yeah, you can
I see.
enable both.
Yeah, yeah, and from the Enovio and Electrics perspective, you can also do that. We have another question from Sam, which is what are the main difference between SuperLab, live markers, and the live marker functionality in iMotions?
I am not familiar with the live markers functionality in iMotions. Actually, I'm not familiar with iMotions overall,
Mhm,
uh, except that I know that there's quite a bit of feature overlap between what SuperLab does and what
mhm,
iMotions does. And with SuperLab 7, that overlap is going to be much bigger.
mhm.
So, but my guess is that what they'd call live markers is probably going to be something very similar to what SuperLab already does.
Mhm. Yeah, iMotion is one of our partners, and their software allows you to record data from many devices. Let's say that you have an audio doing EEG, then you can have an ECG monitor, a galvanic skin response, and they integrate all this data directly on one software. And for sure, the line marker, I guess that's on LSL. I think we have a webinar on that with them.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Okay.
it's probably going to be with the line markers. And that was the last question. So I think that we can conclude. Thank you so much, Hisham, for participating in this webinar. We're very
Thank
happy to
you.
show our customers all of the things that you can do with SuperLab.
Yes, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining. I don't think I've put my email address on any of the slides, but if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to me directly, not sure you have my permission to give out my email too.
Mhm.